Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Right on Crime Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Murphy. I currently serve as the Right on Crime State Director for both Virginia and West Virginia. But today we're discussing issues that impact every state. And I'm excited today to be joined by Mr. Jason Pritchard, an absolutely remarkable individual and a good friend of mine. Now I'm going to let Jason introduce himself to you, but let me just say that Jason is the epitome of what Right on Crime encourages our legislators to embrace. He is a justice-impacted, non-violent former offender who, through faith, treatment, rehabilitation, and reform, has turned his life completely around, and he is now a force of nature in Virginia's recovery communities. Jason, welcome to the podcast, and I thank you for being here.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Jason, I want you to take a few minutes, if you would please, to tell our listeners a little bit about your journey, your story, and then what it is that you're doing these days, okay?
Sure. So my name's Jason Pritchard. I kind of grew up in a family where, unfortunately, drug distribution was a way of life. We were very poor. I learned early on that, the selling of drugs could provide the necessary funds for survival. And I wasn't long before I was experimenting after graduating from high school with alcohol and marijuana. And then slowly moved into other drugs. As in 1998, I was in a couple of car wrecks that led me to roads for pain medications. It wasn't long before I was taking and selling the pills. And from that point, I embarked on a 16-year journey into addiction. That journey into addiction also led me to roads with law enforcement, which led to incarceration, which led to my faith. In 2012, I was sentenced to 3 consecutive sentences that totaled about 6 years, 4 months, and ended up serving about 5 years.
Now, Jason, you actually, your addiction even brought you through. You managed to essentially hide your addiction from many people, right? I mean, you went to college addicted to pain pills. Isn't that right?
I did. Well, actually, yes. So when I first moved to Virginia, I was diagnosed. I went to a local doctor in Virginia. I had been seeing the Carolina Center for Advanced Management of Pain, and they said that I was over-medicated. So they sent me to UVA Pain Management, and UVA Pain Management said I wasn't over-medicated. I was incorrectly medicated. And so they placed me on methadone, which really was my first attempt at recovery. And so I remained on methadone for 3 years, but I still sold those pills and really abused them. I did not take them the way that they were prescribed. And but I did still manage to graduate from Virginia Tech with a bachelor's degree in finance.
How about that? And so I understand through several years afterwards, you engaged in professional work, moved out west for a little bit, but take us up to the point where your run-ins with the law and ultimately your route to recovery and to rehabilitation.
Yeah. So I graduated from Virginia Tech. I moved to Northern Virginia for about 1.5 years. I was off the methadone, but still using marijuana. I ended up getting a promotion and was transferred to an office in California. I went there for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and I sought out employment with a Fortune 50 company. I worked for them in California for about 6 months and then was transferred to Atlanta. And when I was on my way from California to Atlanta, I stopped in North Carolina, and me and my dad got up one morning to go fishing. We were hit head on by a diesel truck carrying 3,800 gallons of diesel fuel. And once again, I was right back on the pain medications. And so one day I'm doing a pill or two, and I'm sitting in this bar talking to this guy, and he asked me if I knew if I had any kind of connection. I was like, I did. A couple phone calls later, and I started moving large quantities of cocaine and prescription pills. And in 2011, I had an encounter with law enforcement where I had given someone a prescription pill that had a prescription for it. So they charged me with distribution by accommodation. And that really upset me because I actually was a person that the insurance wasn't covering the medication, but they had the same prescription as me. And so I was like, oh, you want to see dealing drugs? And so I went and got a bunch of drugs and brought them to the area. And so then I ended up catching a distribution and conspiracy of Suboxone and a federal conspiracy to distribute 5 kilos of cocaine.
Wow. All told, Jason, tell us, how much time did you serve?
So it's interesting. So I actually went into jail for the accommodation on March 20th of 2012. While incarcerated for that, I received the distribution and conspiracy of Suboxone in June of 2012. And so by the time they actually start the court proceedings, I've completed that first 6-month sentence. I then get sentenced to actually for the 20-month sentence. I ended up getting sentenced to 20 months for the distribution and conspiracy of Suboxone. But I got a program. 2 days later, the feds came and got me. So all said, I get from March 20th of 2012, I was sentenced to 64 months. And so I went into prison on March 20th of 2012 and came out March 20th of 2017.
So Jason, that's remarkable to me. Now, for many people, a trajectory like that would lead to almost a revolving door within the criminal justice system. Tell us a little bit. Let's shift. How did you focus on your own personal rehabilitation and ultimately redemption? How did you pursue that?
So I was at the Bristol City Jail, and there was no books. Like if you went to the visiting center, there was maybe 50 Harlequin romance books, but there was really nothing to read. And so one day I'm sitting there and I'm looking, and there's this little piece of paper, and it looked like it had been walked on about 200 times, but it had a bunch of books, and they were 99 cents a piece. And so I start looking at them. Well, unbeknownst to me, the slip of paper is from christianbooks.com. But I send that slip of paper, I mail it home in one of my envelopes to my family and said the books were all 99 cents, and there was about 15 of them. So I asked for 1 or 2 books to be sent in at a time. They end up buying all 15 of them and sending all 15 of them. And it was books like Archaeology versus Christianity. How could dinosaurs have been on the ark? And so I start picking those books up and reading them. And this is just a God intervention. I start picking them up and reading them. And as I finish them, I kind of lay them down like in my cell, and there's nothing else to read. So other guys start picking them up, wanting to read them. So that goes on for about 3 or 4 weeks. And finally, we're all at the point where they're like, man, we should be learning about this stuff. And like, you should teach us. And I'm like, I'm probably not the person that should be teaching about God's word. But I'm at the point where I've read these books. And so I write home, and I don't come from a real Christian family, but I write home and say, hey, can you all send me a Bible? Because most of the Bibles that were in the jail, the pages had been torn out and smoked. So they send me a Bible. And so then I'm really the only one that has like a complete Bible. And so this is really crazy. They start turning the TV off, which is a big deal in jail, for 30 minutes at night, right before lockdown, to read verses and talk about verses of the Bible. And the first change that we tried to make was no cussing on the card table, right? So everyone had to do 10 or 15 push-ups every time they said a cuss word on the card table. By the end of the first day, no one could lift their arms to eat. So it just kind of led. And one night when that started, one night I'm like, God, if this is what you're telling me I'm supposed to do, you're going to have to help me, because, by society standards, here's a life that should amount to nothing. 4-time convicted felon, like, shouldn't be. But from there, God took me on this journey into the federal system, where I was witnessing to shot callers from the Bloods, shot callers from the Crips, like all these people. I came home and right back to my church and started doing all this outreach. I got a job right 9 days out of prison. And worked at Olive Garden as a cook, but 53 weeks to the day, March 27th, 2018, I got $100,000 loan to buy a house there in Bristol. On January 2nd.
Jason, let me interrupt you here, because what you're describing for us is, I mean, you are, I said at the top of this, that you're the epitome of what we strive for. You went into the system maybe a bit of a broken man, right? You were searching and you were trying to find things that made you whole, and that was selling drugs and that was bringing in revenue. And then you're doing hard time, right? And incarceration time is tough. It's hard. So you leave, and within a relatively short period of time, you are on the road not only to recovery, but actually to meaningful employment, to returning to a position of a law-abiding citizen. And so tell us a little bit about that. And shortly, I want to get to these barrier crimes and why it is so important that we influence our legislators to reduce these barrier restrictions on employment. Tell us a little bit about how you transitioned to a rehabilitated, law-abiding citizen.
So I had a lot of support. I think that's I had support from my church. I had support from a recovery group, a local recovery group, but I also had support from my federal probation officer and my state probation officers. My federal probation officer, he came to my house one day, and I had started taking in, as soon as God opened the door for me to get a house, I started taking in other men and letting them stay there. And when the probation officer showed up, he knew that one of the men there in my house was a convicted felon, and he took me downstairs and told me that he could violate me right here. And I told him, I said, sir, I went to prison for selling drugs for 5 years. If I go to prison for taking a man in off the street and helping him, that's something I could live with. Like, I could live for going to prison with that. And maybe 4 weeks later, I get a call from him to come and meet him at the probation office in Big Stone Gap. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I show up there and they have this letter in a thing, and they had released me from federal probation 4 years early because of the work I was doing. So it was all the support that people were putting into me that I was being able to put into other people.
So Jason, let me get to a couple things here. So you and I became friends a couple of years back when our careers brought us together. Okay. And since then we've sort of joined forces, working together on a few important issues within the Virginia General Assembly. And a couple of these issues are working their way through the General Assembly as we speak. And the first thing that I want to highlight and ask you about, you sort of raised with what you just said by being released from probation, right? And so what I would submit is that probation serves a very important role in our criminal justice system, right? There's a deterrent aspect to it, but there's also a public safety component to probation, ensuring that that probation officers are monitoring individuals to make sure that they're comporting with their obligations to society, right? But we want to encourage people to get off of probation, right? And so you've just highlighted that you were released from federal probation several years early, and that was because of the work that you had done to reform and rehabilitate yourself and to do good things in the community, right? And so right now in the Virginia General Assembly is a House bill. It's House Bill 457, and this is an earned compliance credit bill. Can you talk a little bit generally? What does that mean? What is earned compliance credits? And why is it that you and your organization, SAARA, SAARA, are supporting that bill?
So earned compliance credit means that a person can earn credits towards getting off of probation early. So like maybe they complete 30 hours at a community college, or they complete VASAP driving classes, or there's a whole array of things they can do. And one thing that we're supporting is adding the CPRS training for the state of Virginia to that compliance. So if they complete the 2-week certified peer recovery specialist training, that also will be a credit towards getting them off of probation quicker.
Okay, so let me back up for a minute. Your organization, I said it just a moment ago, SAARA is what? It stands for what?
It stands for Substance Abuse, Addiction, and Recovery Alliance.
Okay, so SAARA is focused on legislation that improves, that essentially empowers individuals who are recovering. Is that accurate to say?
Yes.
Okay, and so SAARA supports House Bill 457 in particular because it incentivizes individuals to pursue professional accreditation as a certified peer recovery specialist. Is that right?
Correct.
Well, educate our listeners a little bit. What is a CPRS? What does it mean? Because is it true? Are you a CPRS?
I am a CPRS.
What does it
So
mean?
what a certified peer recovery specialist is it's a person with something called lived experience. So you can have lived experience in an array of things, but in this particular instance, it's talking about a person who has lived experience with addiction or mental health issues, or co-occurring, both mental health and substance use issues. And so the person has to go through a little process. They have to take a 72-hour training. They then have to, or previously have to have been involved working in with people who have substance use issues for 500 hours. And then they have to sit for a Virginia Board of Counseling credential, a state certification test. And once they've done all that, they can submit it all to the Virginia Certification Board for a certification. Once they receive that certification, they can submit that paperwork along with a couple of other things to the Virginia Board of Counseling, and they become a registered peer recovery specialist. So they get a Medicaid billing number, and then they can seek out employment with organizations that bill Medicaid for peer support.
So not only does it encourage people to seek professional development that makes them more marketable and more employable, but in turn, that position turns around and helps people who are seeking rehabilitation counseling. Is that accurate?
Yes, it takes people that are looking for help and helps them by using people who have walked in their shoes.
Awesome. Awesome. And so again, House Bill 457 is an earned compliance credit bill. Both your organization and Right on Crime supports the bill, and that's because it creates a construct whereby individuals on probation are incentivized to pursue professional and rehabilitative opportunities that not only improve themselves, right, but also give them the opportunity to reduce the period of time on which they are on probation, right?
Yes.
And so you also mentioned something here that I want to shift to. I want to shift to barrier crimes, okay? And I know that's near and dear to your heart. Can you educate our listeners a little bit? What is a barrier offense? What is a barrier crime? And how does that impact individuals?
So a barrier crime, so in Virginia, people with substance use or mental health issues or challenges are considered a protected class. And so there's a list of crimes: misdemeanor assault, drug possession, drug distribution. They all are on a list of probably 60 barrier crimes. And so if you have one of those barrier crimes, you can be screened. But if you have two of them, you are basically barred from being able to do peer support and other services from any DBHDS, which is Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. You are barred from doing any service by an organization or for an organization that is licensed and certified by DBHDS.
Okay. And so you were recently in Richmond. You were recently meeting with legislators and promoting Senate Bill 626, excuse me. And so Senate Bill 626 is sponsored by Republican Senator Todd Pillion. Tell us a little bit about the bill and why is it that you're supporting it?
So Senator Bill 626, it takes some of the barrier crimes and basically puts an expiration date. So it says if the person has been off of probation for at least 5 years, then they would be exempt from those barrier crimes, certain ones that are included. I think it addresses misdemeanor barrier crimes. They would be exempt from counting them against them as pursuing employment with a DBHDS certified facility.
And so with the goal being that what we want to do is we want to make smart legislation that encourages individuals to pursue training, education, certification, and meaningful employment. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so what we want to do is we want to reduce these barriers that are restricting people from pursuing meaningful employment.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about, there's a similar bill, House Bill 1269, and that's sponsored by Democratic delegate Sia Price. Can you tell us a bit about that one?
Yes. So it's considered a companion bill to Senate Bill 626. There's one small difference in that the House bill lowers the 5-year standard to 3 years. So in the House bill, if a person has been 3 years off of probation, then the same opportunity would kick in for those misdemeanors to not count against the individual as barrier crimes.
Okay. What I'd like to highlight that I think is remarkable and worth, cheering on is that this is an issue that is really bipartisan, right? We've got both Republican support for both bills. We've got Democratic support for both bills. And the Senate is really interested in examining this issue, right? And so they've also are considering Senate Joint Resolution 24. Are you familiar with that? And can you tell us a little bit about it?
I am. So the Senate joint resolution would launch an investigation into barrier crimes and how they have affect people trying to seek employment. The thing that was really saddened to my heart is that I saw this morning that Senate Bill SJ or SB's Bill 24 was on the dead list. So I believe it had been moved into
tabled, to your understanding. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So that's information that's even, we're doing this in real time and the General Assembly is meeting. Like I said, these things are working their way through. And so that's interesting. I appreciate you updating us on that. Hey, so Jason, listen, I am grateful as always for every opportunity that I get to speak with you. You and I have known each other for some time. I'm proud of you. I think you're doing a fantastic service to our communities and to the Commonwealth. Tell us a little bit about, most recently you were commended by Governor Youngkin.
Yes. So the governor's office reached out to me. I actually met Senator Littell Secretary Littell in Southwest Virginia at an outreach event. And he connected me with some individuals. And so they had me come and give my testimony at Governor Youngkin's recovery breakfast in September. And they gave me a recovery recognition award for the work I've done in the Commonwealth.
That's fantastic. And what I would just say is I would commend you as well. And for our listeners, again, Jason is the embodiment of somebody who has who's been in the system. He's faced his own addiction, but he's also he has sought redemption, rehabilitation, and he is proof positive that when we invest in individuals who have committed nonviolent crimes, right? There is redemption available, and we can return individuals back to society as reformed and law-abiding citizens. And so Jason, really, really excited for you. Really excited for all the good things that you've got going on in your professional career as well. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you.
So if you're interested in these topics, or if you're interested in reading more about these and other topics relating to conservative criminal justice reforms, I'd ask you to check out our website. It's at rightoncrime.com. That's rightoncrime.com. And you can learn a little bit more about Jason in the link that we'll attach to this video. Thank you.